I am Audrey, 32 years old, and to the outside world, I am just a supportive wife struggling to find her footing in the gig economy. My husband Jason likes to tell people that I dabble in freelance marketing, a polite way of saying he thinks I am unemployed and living off his potential. In reality, I am the founder and CEO of Athena Crisis Management, a firm that handles high-stakes public relations disasters for Silicon Valley billionaires. I keep my business quiet because I wanted a marriage based on love, not my 8-figure net worth. But after what happened last Tuesday, I realized that playing the role of the dutiful, submissive wife was the biggest mistake of my life. I was at the Grove in Los Angeles enjoying a rare afternoon off from managing the reputations of tech moguls. I had just treated myself to a vintage Cartier watch, a little reward for closing a $10 million contract that morning. The California sun was warm, and the outdoor mall was bustling with tourists and shoppers. I was feeling light-happy, even until I saw him. Jason. My husband, who had kissed me goodbye that morning and told me he was boarding a flight to Chicago for a crucial tech conference, was standing less than 20 feet away from me. He was not in Chicago. He was not wearing his heavy winter coat. He was wearing the cream linen suit I had bought him for our anniversary, and he was not alone. His arm was wrapped possessively around the waist of a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a time machine from 1985. She was draped in furs despite the 70-degree weather, and her face was pulled tight by what I estimated was her 5th facelift. She was at least 68 years old, dripping in diamonds that caught the sunlight so aggressively it hurt to look at them. Jason leaned in and whispered something into her ear that made her giggle, a high-pitched, unnatural sound that made my skin crawl. I stopped walking. The shopping bags in my hand suddenly felt heavy. I watched as he guided her toward the entrance of Cartier, the same store I had just left. He placed his hand on the small of her back with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. I did not scream. I did not drop my bags. I felt a cold metallic calm wash over me, the same professional detachment I use when a client tells me they have embezzled millions. I walked right up to them just as Jason reached for the door handle. I cleared my throat softly. Jason turned and the color drained from his face faster than water down a drain. His eyes went wide, darting from me to the older woman and back again. He looked like he was about to vomit on his Italian loafers. Before he could stammer a lie, I smiled. It was my best boardroom smile, sharp and dangerous. "Well, hello, sir," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "Your friend is lovely. She looks at least 20 years your senior, wouldn't you say?" The air between us froze. Jason opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The woman turned to look at me, her eyes narrowing behind oversized designer sunglasses. She looked me up and down with a sneer that reeked of old money and entitlement. Jason finally found his voice. "Audrey," he choked out. "This is Patricia, my angel investor. She is helping me with the startup." Patricia did not extend her hand. She just adjusted her fur coat and looked at Jason. "Is this your assistant, Jason?" she asked, her voice raspy and condescending. I didn't let him answer. "Yes," I said, maintaining that icy smile. "I am his assistant, his maid, and occasionally when he remembers to come home, his wife." Before I continue this story and tell you how I systematically dismantled his life, let me make one thing clear. Smart women do not scream in public. We do not throw vases. We throw financial ruin. If you want to see how I turned this man's life into a cautionary tale using nothing but forensic accounting and a few well-placed emails, hit that subscribe button. If you believe respect is non-negotiable, like this video. Now let us go back to the moment I decided to destroy him. The drive home was silent, mostly because Jason refused to come home with me. He claimed he had to finish his meeting with Patricia to save face, leaving me to drive back to the house I paid for, in the car I paid for, to cook dinner for a husband who was currently entertaining a geriatric sugar mommy. When he finally walked through the door at 7 in the evening, he did not apologize. He went on the offensive. He told me I was crazy, that I was jealous, and that I had almost ruined the biggest deal of his life. He claimed Patricia was eccentric and that I had to play along if I wanted him to succeed. Then he dropped the bomb. He had invited her to dinner at our house the following night to apologize for my rude behavior. So there I was, standing in my kitchen the next evening, preparing a 3-course meal for my husband and his mistress. Jason had insisted I cook. He said it would look better than catering, that it would show I was a supportive domestic partner. He wanted me to play the role of the little woman, and for tonight, I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. I was julienning carrots with the precision of a surgeon when Jason stormed into the kitchen. He was sweating. "Audrey, why are you wearing that?" he snapped, pointing at my simple black dress. "You look like a funeral director. Go put on something brighter. Patricia likes vibrant colors. And make sure the roast is perfect. She is very particular about her meat." I looked at him, the knife still in my hand. "I am not changing, Jason," I said calmly. "And the roast will be fine. You should worry more about your pitch deck and less about my wardrobe." He scoffed, grabbing a bottle of wine from the rack. "You just do not get it, do you? This is business, high-level business, something a freelancer like you would not understand. I need this investment. If we get this money, I can finally pay off the credit cards." I almost laughed. The credit cards were in my name, and I had been paying the minimums just to keep his credit score from imploding, while my own secret accounts grew by the hour. But I stayed silent. I turned back to the carrots. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30. Jason rushed to answer it like an eager puppy. I heard Patricia's voice before I saw her. "Oh, Jason, this neighborhood is so quaint. A bit far from the city center, is it not? I suppose it is charming in a rustic sort of way." They walked into the dining room. Patricia was wearing a neon pink dress that clashed violently with her orange spray tan. She looked around our living room, her eyes landing on the Persian rug I had bought at an auction in Istanbul for $40,000. "Nice rug," she said dismissively. "A bit threadbare, though. You should let me introduce you to my interior designer." I walked out of the kitchen carrying the salad bowl. "Good evening, Patricia," I said. "Welcome to our home?" She looked at me as if I were the hired help. "Oh, the assistant is cooking tonight." "How quaint." Jason laughed nervously. "Audrey loves to cook. It is her passion. She is very domestic." He pulled out a chair for her, leaving me to seat myself. Throughout the appetizer, Patricia ignored me completely. She spent the entire time touching Jason's arm, laughing at his unfunny jokes, and talking about her estates in Palm Beach and the Hamptons. She talked about money constantly, but in a way that true wealthy people never do. She bragged about the price of her earrings, the cost of her car, the exclusivity of her clubs. I sat there sipping my water, analyzing her. My company investigates people for a living. I know a fraud when I see one. Patricia was flashy loud and desperate for validation. Real money whispers, but Patricia was screaming. Then came the main course. I served the roast beef perfectly, medium rare. Patricia poked at it with her fork. "It looks a bit bloody, does it not?" she said, wrinkling her nose. "I prefer my meat well done." Jason glared at me. "Audrey, I told you she likes it well done. Why can't you ever listen? I am so sorry, Patricia. Let me take that back to the kitchen." "No," I said, my voice firm. "The meat is cooked perfectly. If you want leather, I can microwave it for you." The table went silent. Jason looked like he was about to have a stroke. Patricia's eyes narrowed. She picked up her glass of red wine, a vintage Cabernet I had been saving for a special occasion, not for this charade. She swirled the liquid around, staring at me. "You have quite an attitude for someone who contributes nothing to this household," she said. "Jason tells me he pays for everything, that you are just a burden he carries out of kindness." I felt the anger flare up hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. "Is that what he told you?" I asked, looking at Jason. He refused to meet my eyes. Suddenly, Patricia's hand jerked. It was not an accident. I watched her wrist flick. The glass of red wine flew across the table, splashing directly onto the Persian rug. The dark red liquid soaked into the intricate wool patterns instantly. "Oops," Patricia said, her voice devoid of any real apology. "I guess I am just clumsy. Or maybe the glass was greasy." Jason jumped up. "Oh my God, the rug. Audrey, get a towel. Hurry up. Don't just sit there." He looked at Patricia with concern. "Are you okay, Patricia? Did it get on your dress?" He was fussing over the woman who had just ruined a $40,000 rug while shouting orders at his wife. That was the moment. That was the trigger. The silence in my head was replaced by the ticking of a clock. It was time. I stood up slowly. I did not run for a towel. I did not apologize. I looked at the stain, then at Jason, then at Patricia. "I am not getting a towel. I said. Jason turned to me, his face red with rage. What did you say? I said I am not cleaning it up, I repeated, and I am not finishing this dinner. I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. Just then, the front door opened. It was Keisha, my sister-in-law. Keisha is married to Jason's younger brother, and she is the only person in this family with a spine. She is also a top-tier criminal defense attorney in downtown L.A. She walked in, took one look at the red stain on the rug, the smirk on Patricia's face, and the rage on Jason's. She didn't say a word to them. She walked straight over to me. "Everything okay here?" Keisha asked, eyeing Patricia with suspicion. Jason tried to intervene. "Keisha, this isn't a good time. We are in the middle of a business meeting." Keisha laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Business meeting? Is that what we are calling it now?" She looked at Patricia. "You must be the investor. I've heard so much about you. Mostly from my brother-in-law, who seems to think you are the second coming of Warren Buffett." Patricia preened. "Well, I do have a knack for spotting talent." Keisha leaned in close to me and whispered loud enough for only me to hear. "Girl, that purse is a knockoff, and those diamonds are cubic zirconia. I know a fence when I see one. This woman is as fake as a $3 bill. Is he cheating on you with her, or is she cheating him?" I looked at Keisha and smiled. "Both," I whispered back, "but do not worry. I am handling it." I turned back to the table. "Jason, Patricia, please excuse me. I have a headache. I am going to retire for the evening. You two enjoy the rest of your negotiation." Jason looked relieved. "Go," he said, "and don't embarrass me anymore." I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I could hear them laughing as soon as I turned the corner. I walked into the kitchen, pulled out my phone, and opened the secure app I use for my business. I typed a message to my lead investigator, a former CIA analyst named Marcus. "Target Patricia Vance. I want everything. Bank records, previous addresses, criminal history. And Marcus freeze the supplementary Amex card ending in 4055, the one Jason is currently carrying. Mark it as stolen." I hit send. I watched the delivery receipt turn into a read receipt. I leaned against the marble counter, listening to the laughter from the dining room. "Laugh while you can, Jason, because tomorrow you are going to find out that the only thing you own in this world is the audacity to cross me." The vibration of my phone against the marble countertop was the only sound in my home office. I glanced down at the screen, and a small, satisfied smile touched my lips. It was a notification from the banking app I had installed on Jason's phone, without his knowledge mirrored directly to mine. Transaction declined. The location was the Ivy, one of the most pretentious and expensive restaurants in Los Angeles, a place where people go not to eat, but to be seen eating. The amount was $480. Jason was trying to impress Patricia with a lunch that cost more than his car payment, and he was trying to do it with money that did not exist. I leaned back in my ergonomic Herman Miller chair, imagining the scene unfolding miles away. I could see Jason sweating in his linen suit, handing the waiter that Platinum American Express card with a flourish. I could see him smiling at Patricia, probably bragging about his phantom portfolio or the fictional exit strategy for his startup. And then the waiter would return, the polite but firm whisper. "The card has been declined, sir. Do you have another form of payment?" The blood draining from Jason's face, the way Patricia would raise a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her estimation of him dropping with every second of silence. My phone rang. The screen flashed hubby. I let it ring twice, 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in. I took a slow sip of my chamomile tea before sliding my finger across the screen. "Hello, Jason." I answered, my voice light and airy, the picture of innocent domesticity. "How is the business lunch going?" "Audrey," he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "Why is the card not working?" "I am at the Ivy. I have a bill for $500, and the card was declined." "What did you do?" I feigned a gasp. "Oh no, that is terrible. I was just looking at the account online. It seems the bank flagged some unusual activity. Did you try to buy something expensive yesterday? Maybe at a jewelry store?" There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, guilty silence. I knew exactly what he had bought. A diamond tennis bracelet from Cartier. I had seen the transaction pending yesterday before I froze the account. He had bought it for Patricia using the joint account that I funded. I bought a gift for a client," he stammered, lying through his teeth. "But that shouldn't matter. Fix it, Audrey. Call the bank right now and tell them to unfreeze it. Patricia is waiting. This is humiliating." I let out a long, dramatic sigh. "I wish I could, honey. But you know how strict the fraud department is. Since the jewelry purchase was so large and it does not match our usual spending profile, they have put a 24-hour hold on the account. I am looking at the alert right now. It says suspected theft." "Suspected theft," he hissed. "I am the account holder. Tell them it was me." "I cannot," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The account is technically in my name, remember. You are just an authorized user, and since I am not there to verify your identity in person, they will not lift the hold until tomorrow. You will just have to use another card." "I do not have another card," he shouted, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. He had maxed out his personal cards months ago on crypto scams and designer shoes. This joint account was his lifeline, his only access to the lifestyle he felt he deserved. "Well," I said, pausing for effect, "maybe Patricia can get this one. She is an investor, right? Surely a $500 lunch is change for her." "Do not be ridiculous," Jason snapped. "I cannot ask her to pay. I am the one pitching her. This makes me look incompetent." "Audrey, you have to do something. Transfer money to my Venmo. Anything." "I am sorry, Jason. The entire account is frozen, including transfers. The bank thinks someone stole your identity and went on a spending spree." I guess they were half right. He hung up. He did not say goodbye. He just slammed the phone down. I stared at the screen. The call ended, notification fading to black. I could feel the adrenaline humming in my veins, but it was not fear. It was power. For years, I had let him play the big man. I had let him pretend he was the provider, while I quietly paid the mortgage, the insurance, and the grocery bills. I had dimmed my light so he could shine, and he had used that light to blind me while he chased other women. Not anymore. Today, Jason learned a valuable lesson. He who holds the purse strings holds the power, and right now his purse was empty. 2 hours later, the front door slammed open. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. I was in the living room, reading a report on market volatility, looking every bit the idle housewife he believed me to be. Jason stormed in his tie, loosened his hair a mess. He looked like a man who had walked through a storm. He threw his keys on the table, chipping the wood. "You!" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are useless. Do you know that? Absolutely useless." I looked up from my iPad, my expression calm. "Welcome home, Jason. How was lunch?" "Do not ask me how lunch was," he yelled, pacing back and forth on the Persian rug he had allowed his mistress to ruin just the night before. "It was a disaster. Patricia had to pay. My angel investor had to pull out her black card and pay for her own lunch because my wife cannot manage a simple bank account." She looked at me like I was a child. I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "I told you, Jason. It was a fraud alert. The bank is just trying to protect us. If you hadn't spent $5,000 at Cartier yesterday, maybe they wouldn't be so suspicious." He stopped pacing and glared at me. His eyes were cold, filled with a resentment that had been brewing for years. "It was business," he spat. "You wouldn't understand. You sit here all day in your little bubble playing with your freelance blogs while I am out there trying to build an empire. I am trying to secure our future. And what do? You sabotage me." "I sabotage you," I repeated quietly. "Jason, I paid off your student loans. I paid for this house. I pay for the car you drive to meet your mistress." He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "You pay. You contribute pennies, Audrey. You think your little marketing gigs keep this house running. I am the visionary here. I am the one with the potential. Patricia sees that. She sees what I am capable of. She told me today after she paid the bill that I deserve a partner who understands the high-stakes world. Someone who elevates me, not someone who drags me down with incompetence. The audacity was breathtaking. He was standing in the living room I bought wearing clothes I paid for, yelling at me because I wouldn't let him use my money to impress another woman. It was almost impressive how delusional he was. So I asked, stepping closer to him, "What happens now? Did she pull the funding?" No, he said, puffing out his chest. Because I'm a good salesman. I spun it. I told her we were switching banks because of poor service. She believed me because she trusts me. But she warned me, Audrey. She said a man's financial stability reflects his home life. If I look messy, it is because my home is messy. You are making me look messy. I see, I said. I will try to do better. You better, he sneered. Because I am this close to closing the deal. And once I do, things are going to change around here. I am going to need a wife who can keep up. If you cannot handle the basics, maybe you are not cut out for the life I am building. He turned and walked toward the bedroom, tossing a final insult over his shoulder. I am going to take a shower. I feel dirty, just being in this house right now. Fix the bank account by tomorrow, Audrey. Or do not bother talking to me. I waited until I heard the shower running. Then I picked up my phone again. I opened the banking app. The fraud alert was real technically because I had triggered it manually, but I could have lifted it with a single tap. I looked at the button that said Unfreeze Card. I hovered my finger over it. Then I navigated to the settings menu. I scrolled down to the section labeled Supplementary Cards. I selected Jason's card. I tapped on Spending Limit. I typed in a new number. $500 per month. I hit Save. You want me to fix it, Jason? I whispered to the empty room. I just did. You are right. A man's financial stability reflects his home life. And your home life is about to get very, very restrictive. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. Not the cheap stuff Jason drank, but a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir I kept hidden in the back of the pantry inside an oatmeal box. I took a sip, savoring the complex notes of cherry and oak. Jason thought he had won this round because he had shouted the loudest. He thought he had put me in my place. He didn't realize that by forcing Patricia to pay, he had shifted the power dynamic in their relationship too. He was no longer the charming young entrepreneur. He was the charity case. And Patricia, a woman who valued status above all else, would not tolerate a charity case for long. I was not just cutting off his money. I was dismantling his image. I was stripping away the costume he wore to convince the world he was successful. Without my money, Jason was just a man in a linen suit with a maxed-out credit card and a dream built on lies. And the best part was, he was doing all the work for me. Every insult he threw at me, every lie he told Patricia was just another shovel of dirt he was removing from the hole he was digging for himself. My phone buzzed again. A text from Keisha. Did the card decline work? I typed back instantly. Like a charm. He is in the shower washing off the shame. Or trying to. Keisha replied with a devil emoji. Good. Next step, the Napa trip. Are you ready for phase 2? I took another sip of wine, looking at the closed bedroom door where my husband was scrubbing himself clean, oblivious to the fact that his life was being systematically deconstructed. I am ready, I typed. Let us send him on a vacation he will never forget. I put the phone down and closed my eyes. I could feel the anger hot and sharp sitting in my chest. But it was contained now. It was fuel. Jason called me useless. He called me a penny pincher. He said I didn't understand business. Poor Jason. He was about to learn that in the business of revenge, I was the chairman of the board, and he was just an asset waiting to be liquidated. The financial squeeze was just the beginning. The real pressure was about to start. The silence in the house lasted exactly 12 hours before Jason decided to reinvent reality again. After the humiliation at the Ivy, I expected him to be humble, perhaps even apologetic. I should have known better. Jason possesses a unique superpower. He can rewrite history in his own mind until he is the hero of every story, even the ones where he is visibly drowning. On Thursday evening, he walked into the kitchen where I was reviewing a contract for a tech CEO in Silicon Valley. He clapped his hands together, his face glowing with a manic sort of energy. "Great news, babe," he announced, grabbing an apple from the bowl. Patricia is not mad about the card situation. In fact, she thinks it is charming. She says it shows we are fiscally responsible. I looked up, keeping my expression neutral. "That is fortunate," I said. I was worried she would think we were destitute. Jason waved his hand dismissively. No. Patricia sees the big picture, and because she believes in me, she has invited me to Napa Valley for the weekend. Just the two of us, to finalize the investment contracts away from the distractions of the city. We are staying at the Auberge. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The Auberge was one of the most romantic and expensive resorts in Napa. It was not a place for business meetings. It was a place for affairs. That sounds intense, I said. A whole weekend. It is work, Audrey, he snapped, sensing my tone. Grueling work. We will be going over spreadsheets and projections for 48 hours straight. Honestly, I would rather stay home and watch football, but I am doing this for us, for our future. He took a bite of the apple, chewing loudly. Now I need you to pack my bag. I have a conference call in 10 minutes and I cannot be distracted. Make sure you pack the linen suits, the navy blazer, and the white silk shirts. And iron them, Audrey. I want crisp lines. Patricia notices details. If I look sloppy, the company looks sloppy. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving the core of the apple on the counter for me to clean up. I stared at it for a moment. He was going on a romantic getaway with his sugar mommy, and he wanted his wife to pack his bags. The audacity was so staggering it was almost impressive. I walked into the bedroom. Jason was already on the balcony, talking loudly on his phone, performing the role of the busy executive for the neighbors. I opened his closet. I pulled out the suitcase. And then I began to pack. I took out the white silk shirts. I set up the ironing board. As the steam hissed from the iron, I imagined pressing it against his smug face. But I did not. Instead, I pressed it against the fabric, smoothing out every wrinkle with terrifying precision. I was the perfect wife, the obedient little woman. Every hiss of the steam was a promise of the scorching that was to come. I packed his silk boxers. I packed his cologne. I packed the specialized hair gel he used to hide his thinning hairline. I was curating the costume for a clown. While I was folding his blazer, I heard the shower turn on in the master bathroom. Jason always took long showers before a trip. He liked to pamper himself. I paused. This was my window. I walked over to the nightstand where he had left his phone. Jason was careless with security because he believed I was too technologically illiterate to crack a passcode. He used his birthday. Not even his birth year, just the month and day. 4 digits, 0524. I typed it in. The phone unlocked. My heart rate did not increase. My hands did not shake. I moved with the efficiency of a surgeon. I opened the browser and navigated to a secure server I maintained for my business. I downloaded a small, innocuous-looking file. It was a mirroring software called Ghost Protocol. It was designed to run in the background, undetectable by standard antivirus scans. It would forward every text, every call log, every GPS location, and every audio recording directly to my private server. I tapped Install. A small progress bar appeared on the screen. 10%. I heard the water running in the shower. Jason was humming a tune. He sounded happy. He sounded like a man who thought he had gotten away with everything. 40%. The humming stopped. I heard the squeak of the shower handle turning. He was adjusting the temperature. 60%. I glanced at the bathroom door. A sliver of steam was escaping from the crack at the bottom. If he walked out now, if he saw me with his phone, the game would change. He would lock down everything. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to feel superior. 80%. The water stopped. I held my breath. I could hear the sound of the glass shower door opening, the squelch of wet feet on the bath mat. 99%. Come on, I whispered. Installed. The icon vanished from the home screen, burying itself deep in the system architecture. I wiped the screen with the hem of my shirt to remove my fingerprints, placed the phone back on the nightstand exactly at the angle I found it, and stepped back to the ironing board. When Jason walked out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his waist, I was meticulously ironing the collar of his navy blazer. He looked at me, then at the phone, then back to me. He smiled. "You are doing a good job, Audrey," he said condescendingly. "See, you can be useful when you try." I didn't look up. "I just want you to look your best, Jason. For the investors." He dropped the towel and began to dress. I watched him preen in the mirror. He sucked in his stomach. He flexed his soft arms. He really believed he was a prize. Then he did something that made the air leave my lungs. He walked over to my side of the closet to the small safe where we kept our valuables. He punched in the code. He reached into the back past my jewelry and pulled out a velvet box. My breath hitched. He opened the box and took out a watch. It was a vintage Rolex Daytona Paul Newman edition. It had belonged to my father who had built a small empire from nothing, who had taught me everything I knew about business, and who had left me this watch on his deathbed. It was worth more than Jason's entire startup. I never wore it. I kept it safe, a sacred relic of the man who actually loved me. Jason strapped it onto his wrist. The metal looked wrong against his skin. It looked like a desecration. "Jason," I said, my voice dangerously low, "that is my father's watch." He adjusted the clasp, admiring the way it caught the light. "I know, babe, but I need a power piece. Patricia knows watches. If I show up wearing my Apple Watch, I look like a tech bro. If I show up wearing this, I look like old money. I look like I belong in her world." He turned to me, grinning. "Do not worry. I will be careful. It is just a loan. Think of it as your father investing in my success, too. He would have wanted me to succeed, right? My father would have wanted to break your fingers, I thought." I looked at the watch on his wrist. That watch had timed the signing of mergers that built skylines. Now it was going to time a weekend of adultery in Napa Valley. "Take it off," I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a smile. It was rigid and painful, but it was there. "Just be careful with it, Jason," I said. "The clasp is delicate." He waved a hand. "It will be fine. You worry too much." He finished dressing. He looked in the mirror one last time, adjusted his collar, and grabbed the suitcase I had perfectly packed. "I am heading out," he said. "Do not wait up on Sunday. I might be late depending on how the negotiations go." He leaned in and gave me a quick dry peck on the cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and betrayal. "Bye, honey," I said. "Drive safe." The moment the front door closed, the house fell silent. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the space where he had been. The rage was a physical thing now, a hot iron pressing against my ribs. He had taken my labor. He had taken my money. And now he had taken my father's legacy to impress his mistress. I walked to my office and opened my laptop. I logged into the Ghost Protocol dashboard. The data was already streaming in. I could see his GPS dot moving down the driveway. I could see his battery percentage. And then the first audio file appeared. He was making a call from the car. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and clicked play. "Hey, Patricia." Jason's voice filled my ears. "I am on my way. And wait until you see the watch I am wearing. It is a vintage Daytona. Yeah, family heirloom. I told you my family comes from money, we just keep it quiet." I gritted my teeth. He was claiming my heritage as his own. I paused the audio and clicked on the text message tab. He had been texting Patricia while he was in the shower. I scrolled through the thread. It was nauseating. Heart emojis, eggplant emojis, promises of what he would do to her in the vineyard. But then I saw a document attached to a message from Patricia sent 2 days ago. The file name was Lease Agreement Amendment Draft. I opened it. It was a legal document regarding the commercial building on Wilshire Boulevard, the building where Jason rented the entire top floor for his failing startup. The rent was $40,000 a month. I scanned the document. My eyes widened. The landlord listed on the header was not a management company. It was PV Holdings, LLC. Patricia Vance Holdings. I sat back stunned. Patricia was not just an investor. She was his landlord. I read the text message Patricia had sent with the document. "Jason, darling, I am so excited for Napa. If you make me happy this weekend, and I mean really happy, I think we can make this little amendment official. 5 years rent-free. That is a $2 million gift, baby. Consider it my investment in your talents." I stared at the screen. The puzzle pieces slammed into place. Jason was not just cheating for the thrill of it. He was whoring himself out for rent money. He was trading his body and my dignity for a lease extension. He was desperate. He knew his company was bleeding cash, and this was his Hail Mary pass. He was going to Napa to sleep his way out of bankruptcy. A dry, dark laugh escaped my throat. He thought Patricia owned the building. He thought PV Holdings, LLC, was the ultimate authority. Jason didn't know the history of that building. He didn't know that 3 months ago, PV Holdings LLC had quietly sold its majority stake in a private liquidation sale to cover Patricia's gambling debts in Monte Carlo. He didn't know who the new majority shareholder was. I opened another tab on my browser. I pulled up the corporate structure of my own assets. I clicked on the folder marked Real Estate. I opened the file for Wilshire Commercial Trust. There it was, the purchase agreement. I owned the building. Well, technically, a blind trust managed by my firm owned the building, but the result was the same. Patricia was playing him. She didn't have the power to waive his rent anymore. She was stringing him along using an asset she no longer controlled to get a weekend of fun with a younger man. She was conning the con artist, but Jason didn't know that, and Patricia didn't know that I knew. I looked at the GPS dot moving onto the freeway heading north toward Napa. "Go ahead, Jason," I whispered. "Wear my father's watch. Drink the expensive wine. Sign the fake contracts. You are driving straight into a trap, and you are so busy looking at yourself in the rearview mirror that you do not see the cliff edge." I reached for my phone. I needed to make a call, not to Jason, but to the property manager of the Wilshire building. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said when he answered. "This is Audrey. Yes, I am looking at the tenant list. The startup on the top floor. Yes, that one. I want to schedule a surprise inspection of the premises for Monday morning. Violation of lease terms, subleasing, immoral activities. Oh, and Mr. Henderson, have the eviction notice drafted, just in case." I hung up. The weekend had just begun. Jason thought he was going to a romantic getaway. He was actually going to a performance review, and his boss was watching every move. I closed the laptop. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the apple core Jason had left. I tossed it into the trash. "Garbage," I said softly. It was time to take out the trash. Jason had been gone for less than 3 hours when the peace of my evening was shattered. I was sitting in the living room with Keisha sharing a bottle of wine and debriefing on the events of the last 24 hours. We were laughing about the Ghost Protocol software and how clearly we could hear Jason's terrible taste in music through the car audio feed. It felt like a girls' night, a moment of sanity in the middle of the circus my life had become. Then the front door opened. I froze. I knew I had changed the locks digitally, but I had forgotten one thing. Jason had given a physical emergency key to his mother, Linda. And Linda did not understand the concept of knocking. She walked in as if she owned the deed to the property, her heels clacking loudly on the hardwood floors. Linda is a woman who believes that volume is a substitute for personality. She was wearing a floral dress that was too young for her and carrying a casserole dish that smelled suspiciously of tuna and passive aggression. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Linda announced, looking at us with disdain. "My son is out working himself to the bone to provide for this family, and you two are sitting here drinking his expensive wine." Keisha rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Hello, Linda," she said dryly. "Nice to see you too. Did you break in, or did the devil give you a master key?" Linda ignored her. She has always hated Keisha. She hates that Keisha is a successful lawyer. She hates that Keisha is black. And mostly she hates that Keisha refuses to kiss the ring of the matriarch. Linda turned her gaze to me, her eyes sweeping over my relaxed posture with disapproval. "Audrey," she snapped, "why are you not packing? Jason told me he is on a very important business trip in Napa. A wife should be supporting her husband, not lounging around." I set my wine glass down slowly. I decided to play the part. The confused, neglected wife. It was the best way to get information. "He didn't invite me, Linda," I said, making my voice sound small. "He went with an investor, a woman named Patricia." Linda's face changed. It wasn't shock. It was a smug, knowing smile. She walked over to the kitchen island and set down the casserole dish. "Oh, yes," Patricia Linda said, her voice dripping with reverence. "A wonderful woman. Jason showed me her picture. Very sophisticated, very wealthy. She is exactly the kind of connection Jason needs." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. She knew. She knew exactly who Patricia was, and she knew exactly what kind of trip this was. "But Linda," I said, pushing a little harder, "she is almost 70 years old, and she is very friendly with Jason. Do you not think it is inappropriate? They are staying at the auberge, in the same suite. Linda waved her hand dismissively. Oh, grow up, Audrey. You are so provincial. That is how business is done in the big leagues. You do whatever it takes to close the deal. Patricia has resources. She has connections. If she wants a little attention from a handsome young man, what is the harm? Jason is charming. He is using his assets. I looked at Keisha. Her jaw was on the floor. Are you serious? Linda Keisha asked, her voice rising. You are talking about your son like he is a piece of meat. You are cool with him sleeping with a geriatric sugar mama for a check. Linda turned on Keisha, her face flushing red. Watch your mouth. Jason is securing his future. He is securing the family legacy, something neither of you would understand. You, Keisha, with your little public defender cases, and you, Audrey, with your little freelance hobbies. You are dead weight. Both of you. She took a step closer to me, pointing a manicured finger in my face. Let me be clear, Audrey. Jason deserves better than you. He deserves a woman who can elevate him. Patricia can give him the world. She can give him status. What can you give him? You are 32 years old, you have no real career, and you spend his money on... what? Organic groceries and books. I tapped the screen of my Apple Watch under the table, ensuring the voice memo app was recording every syllable, so I asked quietly, You are saying you want Jason to be with Patricia, even if it means us getting divorced? Linda laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. Divorce might be the best thing for him. Let him get the investment first. Let him get the money, the connections, the lease on the building. Then once he is established, he can upgrade. You have had your turn, Audrey. You had 5 years to help him become a success, and he is still struggling. Clearly, you are the problem. Patricia is the solution. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Jason does what is necessary. He is a king. And if he has to service a queen to build his kingdom, then that is his sacrifice. You should be on your knees thanking him for carrying this family. I stood up. My movements were slow, deliberate. I walked over to Keisha and placed a hand on her shoulder. She was trembling not from fear, but from the effort of not physically destroying the older woman. Get out, I said. My voice was not loud. It was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a death sentence. Linda straightened her dress, looking triumphant. Oh, I am leaving. I just came to drop off dinner. I did not realize the atmosphere would be so toxic. When Jason comes back a millionaire on Monday, do not expect him to be generous with you, Audrey. He knows who his real supporters are. She grabbed her purse and marched toward the door. Before she left, she turned back one last time. By the way, Audrey, my condo fees are due on Tuesday. Make sure Jason sends the transfer. I do not want a late fee like last time. The door slammed shut. I stood there in the silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Keisha let out a long breath and sank back into her chair. She touched her cheek. It was already turning red. I am going to sue her, Keisha said. I am going to sue her for assault battery and emotional distress. And then I am going to get a restraining order. I poured Keisha another glass of wine. I handed it to her. You won't have to sue her for the condo fees, I said, my voice eerily calm. Keisha looked at me. What do you mean? I sat down and picked up my phone. I stopped the recording on my watch and saved the file. I named it Linda's Confession. Linda thinks Jason pays for her condo, I explained. She thinks Jason pays for her Lexus lease. She thinks Jason sends her that $2,000 monthly allowance for her quote-unquote charity work. Keisha frowned. Jason is broke. He has been broke for years. Exactly, I said. I pay for the condo. I pay for the Lexus. I pay the allowance. I set it all up through a shell company so Jason could take the credit. He wanted to look like the big provider, the dutiful son. I let him. I thought it was harmless. I thought I was helping him maintain his relationship with his mother. I opened my banking app. I navigated to the standing orders section. Keisha stared at me, a slow grin spreading across her face despite the swelling on her cheek. Oh my God. Audrey, I found the transfer for the condo association. Cancel. I found the lease payment for the Lexus. Cancel. I found the monthly allowance transfer. Cancel. Then I opened my email and drafted a message to the landlord of the condo complex where Linda lived. Subject termination of lease guarantor. To whom it may concern. Please be advised that effective immediately, I am withdrawing my personal guarantee for the lease of Unit 4B, occupied by Linda Miller. Furthermore, all future automatic payments from my account are hereby revoked. Please contact the tenant directly for payment. I hit send. Keisha started laughing. It was a wild, joyful sound. You just made her homeless. Not just homeless, I said. I just took away her car, her income, and her pride. She thinks Jason is her golden ticket. She thinks he is going to come back from Napa with millions. She has no idea that by Monday, Jason will be unemployed and she will be receiving an eviction notice. I looked at the door where Linda had exited. She had slapped Keisha. She had insulted me. She had encouraged her son to cheat. She had called us dead weight. She wanted a provider, I said softly. She wanted a man who makes hard decisions. Well, she is about to find out what happens when the real provider decides to stop being generous. I turned to Keisha. Are you okay? Keisha took a sip of wine, wincing slightly as the glass touched her cheek. I am better than okay, she said. I just watched you nuke an entire family tree from your phone. It was beautiful. I smiled. The eerie calm was back, settling over me like a protective cloak. This was just the collateral damage, I said. Now let us check on the main target. I opened the laptop again. The ghost protocol was still running. A new audio file had just uploaded from Napa. I clicked play. It was Jason. He sounded drunk. Patricia, you are so experienced. My wife, she is just so boring. She is like a piece of white bread. You are like caviar. I listened to the sound of them clinking glasses. Enjoy the caviar, Jason, I whispered, because the bill is coming due, and it is going to be astronomical. I looked at Keisha. Go put some ice on that face. We have a busy weekend ahead. I need to draft some termination letters for my company. It seems I need to fire a few people on Monday. Keisha raised an eyebrow. Who are you firing? I smiled cold and sharp. Everyone with the last name Miller. The betrayal of the mother-in-law had hurt, yes, but pain is a temporary emotion. Bankruptcy is a permanent state of affairs. Linda had gambled on the wrong horse. She thought she was backing a winner, but she had just kicked the person who owned the racetrack. And on Monday, the lights were going out. The house was quiet on Sunday morning, a stark contrast to the chaos Jason was undoubtedly creating in Napa Valley. While my husband was busy playing the role of the high-rolling entrepreneur with his geriatric mistress, I was doing what I do best, due diligence. I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of black coffee and my laptop diving into the digital footprint of Patricia Vance. Jason saw a wealthy widow in couture. I saw a liability. My team had sent over the raw data files at 3 a.m. I spent hours sifting through the noise. There were the usual trappings of Wealth Charity Gala Society pages, photos of her on yachts in the Mediterranean. But as I dug deeper into the probate court records of Palm Beach County, the glossy image began to crack. I found a filing from 18 months ago. It was a petition for conservatorship filed by her 2 sons, William and Edward Vance. I opened the document, my eyes scanning the legal jargon. The sons alleged that Patricia was suffering from early onset dementia and a compulsive spending disorder. They cited instances where she had transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars to online romance scammers and bought timeshares in countries she had never visited. The judge had ruled in their favor. Patricia Vance did not control her own fortune. Her sons did. They gave her an allowance, a black card with a hard limit, and they let her play the part of the wealthy matriarch because it was easier than fighting her. But legally, she could not sign a contract. She could not authorize an investment. She was, for all intents and purposes, a child playing with monopoly money. I leaned back the cold porcelain of the coffee mug against my lip. Jason was currently debasing himself for a woman who could not even legally buy a used Honda without her son's permission. The irony was delicious, but then I found something that made the situation shift from pathetic to dangerous. I accessed the recent credit inquiries on our joint home title. There was a ping from yesterday, a hard inquiry from a predatory lending firm known for high-interest bridge loans. Jason was not just trying to get money from Patricia, he was trying to get money for her. The front door unlocked. My watch read 11 in the morning. Jason was back early. He walked in looking like a man who had not slept in 48 hours. His linen suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot, and he smelled of stale champagne and desperation. He did not say hello. He marched straight to the kitchen island, slammed a thick stack of papers down next to my coffee, and looked at me with a manic intensity that was almost frightening. "We need to sign these," he said, his voice raspy. "Right now." I looked at the papers. It was a home equity line of credit application. A HELOC. He wanted to pull equity out of our house, the house I had paid for. "Jason," I said, keeping my voice calm. "What is this?" "It is the buy-in," he said, pacing around the kitchen island. "Patricia has offered me a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It is a reverse investment structure. If I put up $500,000 cash into her private holding trust for just 30 days, she will release the $2 million seed funding for my company. It is a trust exercise, Audrey. She needs to know I have skin in the game." I stared at him. It was the oldest scam in the book. The advance fee fraud. Give me money to prove you are worthy of my money. If Patricia was actually wealthy and lucid, she would never ask for this. But since she was broke and delusional, or perhaps simply cruel, she was milking him dry. "Jason," I said slowly, "you want to mortgage our home, the only asset we actually own, to give $500,000 cash to a woman you just met." He slammed his hand on the counter. "It is not a woman I just met. She is a partner. And it is not spending the money, Audrey. It is leverage. It sits in escrow. We get it back in a month plus interest. But I need the cash today. The wire has to hit her account by tomorrow morning or the deal is off." He shoved a pen toward me. "Sign it. You are on the deed, so I need your signature." I looked at the pen. Then I looked at him. He was vibrating with greed. He truly believed that this was his ticket to the big leagues. He was so blinded by the promise of millions that he couldn't see the cliff he was standing on. If I refused, he would throw a tantrum. He would blame me for his failure for the rest of his life. He would say I killed his dream. But if I signed... I paused. If I signed, he would be committing bank fraud. The application stated the funds were for home improvements. Using them for a commercial investment was a felony. Furthermore, transferring that money to Patricia would trigger a dozen red flags. And when the money inevitably disappeared because Patricia's sons would seize it or she would spend it on slot machines, Jason would be left with a $500,000 debt he could not pay. But that wasn't enough. I needed a guarantee. I picked up the papers and pretended to read them. I flipped through the pages slowly, letting the silence stretch until Jason looked like he was going to explode. "I don't know, Jason," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "This is our home. If something goes wrong..." "Nothing will go wrong," he shouted. "God, why are you always such a coward? This is how business works. You leverage assets to build wealth. Do you want to be a freelancer forever? Do you want to count coupons for the rest of your life? I am trying to build an empire here." I looked down at my hands. "I am scared, Jason. I need some security." "Security," he scoffed. "I am your security." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin file folder. I had prepared this document weeks ago, anticipating a moment like this. It was a post-nuptial addendum disguised as a simple loan agreement. "I will sign the mortgage," I said softly. "But you have to sign this." He snatched the folder. "What is it?" "It is just an agreement between us." I lied smoothly. "Since we are risking the house, which is technically in both our names, I just wanted in writing that this loan is for your business. And if for some reason the investment doesn't work out and we have to pay this debt, I want your shares in the startup as collateral." Jason laughed. He actually laughed. "You want my shares?" "Audrey, my shares are going to be worth $10 million next year. You think a $500,000 loan covers that?" I shrugged. "Then don't sign it, and I won't sign the mortgage." He looked at the clock. He was running out of time. He looked at the document. He didn't read the fine print. He didn't see the clause on page 3 that defined default, not just as non-payment, but as any breach of fiduciary duty or criminal investigation. He didn't see the acceleration clause that triggered an immediate transfer of 100% of his equity to me if the house faced foreclosure. He just saw an obstacle he needed to bulldoze. "Fine," he said, grabbing the pen. "You want my shares. Take them. They are useless without me running the company anyway. You wouldn't know what to do with a tech firm if it fell in your lap." He signed the document with a flourish. He didn't even ask for a copy. "Now sign the mortgage," he commanded. I picked up the pen. I felt the weight of it in my hand. This was it. The moment I handed him the rope, I signed my name. Audrey Miller. The letters looked sharp, precise. Jason grabbed the papers before the ink was dry. "I am going to the bank. I will be back late. I have to celebrate with Patricia." He ran out of the door, clutching the papers to his chest like a winning lottery ticket. I watched him go through the window. I watched him get into his leased BMW and peel out of the driveway. He was driving toward a bank to commit a felony to wire money he didn't have to a woman who couldn't legally accept it. I walked back to the kitchen and picked up the document he had just signed, the one that gave me his company. "You are right, Jason," I whispered to the empty room. "I wouldn't know what to do with a tech firm, but I know exactly what to do with a failing asset. I am going to liquidate it." I picked up my phone and called Keisha. "It is done," I said. "He signed the collateral agreement, and he is on his way to the bank to strip the equity from the house." Keisha let out a low whistle. "He is actually going through with it. Does he know that is bank fraud?" "He doesn't care," I said. "He thinks he is untouchable." "So what is the next move?" Keisha asked. I looked at the signature on the page. "Now we wait," I said. "We let the wire go through. We let him give the money to Patricia, and then tomorrow morning when the money is gone and the debt is real, I trigger the foreclosure clause." But Audrey, Keisha paused. "If he mortgages the house, you lose the equity too. That is $500,000 of your money gone." I smiled. It was a cold, calculated smile that didn't reach my eyes. "It is not gone, Keisha. It is an investment. I am paying $500,000 to buy my freedom and total ownership of his intellectual property. And besides, I have already arranged to buy the note from the predatory lender he is using." Keisha gasped. "You are the bank." "I am the bank," I confirmed. "I am lending him my own money through a shell company to dig his own grave. When he defaults, I foreclose on myself. I keep the house, I take the company, and he walks away with nothing but a debt he can never repay." "You are terrifying," Keisha said, "and I love it." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the sink and rinsed my coffee cup. The house was silent again. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I thought about Jason celebrating with Patricia tonight. I imagined them toasting to their brilliance. I imagined him feeling like a king. Let him have his night, I thought. Let him have his champagne, because tomorrow the hangover is going to be fatal. I went back to my laptop. I had one more email to send. This one was to Edward Vance, Patricia's son. Subject: unauthorized financial activity. Urgent. Dear Mr. Vance, I believe your mother is being targeted by a financial predator named Jason Miller. He intends to wire a large sum of money to her account tomorrow. I suggest you monitor the transaction and freeze the funds immediately for her protection. I hit send. I wasn't just letting Jason lose the money. I was ensuring that once he sent it, he would never ever get it back. Patricia's sons would seize it as evidence of elder abuse. Jason would be out the cash, out the house, and facing an investigation from the very people he tried to swindle. I closed my laptop. The trap was set. The bait was taken. The cage door was swinging shut. I walked upstairs to my closet. I pushed aside the modest clothes Jason liked me to wear and reached for the back where I kept my real wardrobe. I pulled out a red silk dress. It was bold. It was powerful. It was the color of war. I am going out for dinner, I decided. A nice, expensive dinner alone to celebrate my new acquisition. After all, I had just bought a tech company for the price of a signature. Monday night arrived with the suffocating weight of inevitable disaster. This was the night of the gala, the grand celebration of Jason's startup creating a facade of success to mask the rotting foundation underneath. He had rented the ballroom at the Beverly Wilshire, a venue he could not afford paid for, with the initial draw from the fraudulent home equity line of credit he had coerced me into signing just 24 hours prior. To Jason, this was his coronation. To me, it was a crime scene, and I was the lead investigator gathering the final pieces of evidence before making an arrest. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in our bedroom, staring at the dress Jason had selected for me. It was a shapeless beige chiffon number that looked like something a mother of the bride would wear in 1995. It was dowdy, unflattering, and designed to make me disappear into the wallpaper. Jason had been explicit. He told me he did not want me to distract from the main event. He wanted me to look modest, supportive, and invisible. I ran my hands over the cheap fabric. He wanted a ghost, so I would give him a ghost. But he forgot that ghosts are the ones who haunt the living. Underneath the beige monstrosity, I was wearing a set of La Perla lingerie that cost more than his car payment, and hidden in my clutch was the deed to the building where his office was located. I applied my makeup with military precision, minimalist, clean. I pulled my hair back into a severe chignon. I looked like a librarian, which was perfect because tonight I was going to read him for filth. Jason had already left hours ago to escort Patricia. He claimed she needed help with her entrance. The reality was that he wanted to arrive with the woman he believed was bankrolling his future, not the wife he was actively defrauding. I took an Uber Black to the hotel alone. The driver, a polite man named Ahmed, asked if I was going to a party. I told him I was going to a funeral. He laughed, thinking I was joking. I was not. When I arrived at the Beverly Wilshire, the air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. I walked past the giant posters of Jason's face that he had set up in the lobby. The tagline read, "Innovating the Future." I almost laughed out loud. The only thing Jason was innovating was new ways to commit grand larceny. I navigated through the crowd of employees and minor investors. I recognized a few faces. There was the VP of sales who looked worried. There was the HR director who looked tired. They were drinking heavily, which was never a good sign at a corporate event. They sensed the ship was sinking, even if the captain was busy drinking champagne on the deck. I scanned the room for my table. Jason had sent me the seating chart via email that morning with a note that said, "Do not make a fuss." I walked past table 1, the head table draped in gold silk and laden with elaborate floral arrangements. That was where Jason and Patricia were seated. I walked past table 2, reserved for the executive board. I kept walking, past the mid-level managers, past the interns. Finally, I reached table 19. It was located in the far back corner of the ballroom, directly next to the swinging doors of the kitchen and the entrance to the service restrooms. Every time a waiter walked by, I was hit with a gust of steam and the smell of reheating chicken. Every time someone used the restroom, I heard the flush. My table mates were the IT support guy who wore headphones around his neck, a freelance graphic designer who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, and 2 empty chairs. This was where Jason had placed his wife. In the nosebleed section. In the shadows. I sat down, smoothing the beige chiffon over my knees. The IT guy, whose name I recalled was Kevin, looked at me. "Aren't you Jason's wife?" he asked, looking confused. "Why are you sitting back here with the nerds?" I picked up my water glass. "I prefer the acoustics back here, Kevin," I said calmly. "Plus, I get the food first when it comes out of the kitchen." Kevin chuckled nervously and went back to his phone. I scanned the room again. The lights dimmed and the spotlight hit the double doors at the front of the room. The DJ, whom Jason had undoubtedly overpaid, announced their arrival. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Miller Tech, Jason Miller, and his guest of honor, the visionary investor, Ms. Patricia Vance." The doors swung open. Jason walked in wearing a tuxedo that was a size too small, grinning like a game show host. On his arm was Patricia. If I looked invisible in beige, Patricia was a flare gun in a dark room. She was wearing a sequined silver gown that was cut so low it defied gravity and good taste. It was tight, revealing every lump and bump of her surgical enhancements. She was draped in a white fur stole that dragged on the floor. She looked like a disco ball that had melted. The room applauded politely. Jason waved, soaking in the adulation. He led Patricia to the head table, pulling out her chair with a flourish that was painful to watch. He leaned in and whispered something to her, and she threw her head back in a cackle that echoed off the high ceilings. It was a performance. A grotesque high-definition performance of wealth and power put on by 2 people who were financially insolvent. I watched them from my exile at table 19. A waiter dropped a bread roll near my foot as he rushed out of the kitchen. I didn't move. I just watched. 10 minutes later, I felt a presence beside me. I looked up to see Keisha standing there. She was wearing a stunning emerald green jumpsuit that made her look like a warrior queen. She looked at the kitchen doors, then at the bathroom, then at me. "Hell no," Keisha said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. "He did not put you by the toilets." I smiled at her. "Sit down, Keisha. The view is fascinating from here. You can see the strings on the puppets much better from the back." Keisha pulled out one of the empty chairs and sat down fuming. She poured herself a glass of wine from the bottle on the table. "This is grounds for murder, Audrey. Forget the lawsuit. Let us just burn the building down." "Relax," I said, touching her arm. "Look at him. He is so happy. Let him have his moment." We watched as Jason worked the room. He was introducing Patricia to everyone. He was showing her off like a prize poodle. But I noticed something the others missed. Patricia was already drunk. She was swaying slightly in her seat. Her movements were sloppy. She kept reaching out and touching Jason's face, his chest, his thigh. It was possessive and territorial. And Jason, my husband, the man who claimed to value professionalism above all else, was letting her do it. He was leaning into her touch. The dinner service was a blur of mediocre rubber chicken and lukewarm vegetables. I barely touched my food. I was too busy calculating the cost of this party in my head. The venue, $50,000. The catering, $20,000. The flowers, $10,000. Jason had blown nearly $100,000 of the fraudulent loan in one night. He was literally eating his own equity. Finally, the moment arrived. The speeches. Jason walked onto the stage. He tapped the microphone. The room went silent. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes shining with manic pride. He looked at the head table. He did not look at table 19. "Thank you all for coming," Jason began, his voice booming. "Tonight is a celebration of vision, of grit, of the refusal to give up. When I started Miller Tech, people told me I was crazy. They told me I didn't have the capital. They told me I didn't have the connections." He paused for dramatic effect. "But I knew that true success is not about what you have in the bank. It is about who believes in you." And for a long time, I felt alone in that belief. I felt like I was dragging a dead weight trying to run a marathon with an anchor tied to my waist. The room got very quiet. Everyone knew he was talking about me. Keisha gripped her wine glass so hard I thought it would shatter. But then Jason continued, his voice softening into a fake reverence. "Then I met someone who saw the fire in me. Someone who didn't ask for smallness but demanded greatness. Someone who opened doors that were previously locked." He gestured to Patricia. "Ladies and gentlemen, the woman who has changed my life. The woman who saved this company. Patricia Vance." Patricia stood up. She wobbled. She waved both hands like the Queen of England. She blew kisses to the crowd. Jason smiled at her, looking like a love-struck teenager. Patricia is not just an investor. She is a muse. She is a partner in every sense of the word. She understands the sacrifices required for greatness. Then he made the mistake. The fatal, irreversible mistake. He looked toward the back of the room. He couldn't see me in the shadows, but he knew where he had placed me. "And I also want to thank my wife, Audrey," he said, his tone shifting to a dismissive, patronizing chuckle. "Audrey is back there somewhere. Wave your hand, honey." I did not wave. Audrey has been, well, she keeps the home fires burning. She makes sure the fridge is stocked and the dog is walked. And honestly, someone has to do the heavy lifting at home so the real work can happen here. So thank you, Audrey, for taking care of the domestic stuff. You are a great support staff. The air sucked out of the room. It was not just an insult. It was a public execution of my dignity. The employees shifted in their seats. They looked down at their plates. Even the IT guy. Kevin looked at me with pity. Keisha started to stand up. I grabbed her wrist. "Sit," I hissed. "Wait." Jason turned back to Patricia, clearly thinking his joke had landed. "Patricia, come up here. Come join me." Patricia stumbled up the stairs to the stage. She was holding a champagne flute that was mostly empty. She grabbed the microphone from Jason, but she didn't speak. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his neck. She pressed her body against his. It was awkward. It was intimate. It was inappropriate. "Oh, Jason," she slurred into the mic, "you are such a bad boy." Then in front of 200 employees, investors, and industry peers, Patricia Vance grabbed my husband's buttocks with both hands. She squeezed. Hard. The sound of the microphone picking up the fabric rustling was audible. The crowd gasped. It was a collective, sharp intake of breath. Jason froze. His eyes went wide. For a split second, I saw the panic. He knew this was wrong. He knew this was sexual harassment. He knew this was humiliating. But then I saw his eyes dart to the imaginary checkbook in his head. He remembered the mortgage. He remembered the lease. He remembered the millions he thought she controlled. And he smiled. He did not push her away. He did not step back. He laughed a nervous, forced sound and put his arm around her waist. "She is very passionate, everyone," Jason said into the mic, his voice cracking slightly. "That is the kind of passion we bring to Miller Tech. We love what we do." Patricia giggled and planted a wet, sloppy kiss on his cheek, leaving a smear of bright red lipstick. She buried her face in his neck. "I love you, baby," she whispered, but the mic caught it. Everyone heard it. The room was frozen in horror. The VP of sales put his head in his hands. The HR director looked like she was witnessing a lawsuit in real time. I sat at table 19 next to the swinging kitchen doors, and I felt a sense of absolute clarity. Jason had just sold his soul for a bounced check. He had allowed himself to be groped, objectified, and humiliated on stage by a senile woman with no money, all to secure a future that I already owned. He had insulted the woman who held the deed to his building and the note to his debt to praise the woman who was about to drag him down into bankruptcy. Keisha leaned over to me. Her anger had vanished, replaced by pure shock. "He is letting her do it," Keisha whispered. "He is actually letting her grope him for money." I picked up my phone. I snapped a photo. It was grainy, taken from the back of the room, but it was clear enough. Jason on stage, red lipstick on his cheek, Patricia's hands all over him, the Miller Tech logo beaming behind them. "I am sending this to the board of directors," I said quietly, "and to the ethics committee." But Audrey Keisha said, "He is the board." "Not for long," I replied. I stood up. I didn't wait for the speech to end. I didn't wait for the cake. I smoothed my beige dress, picked up my clutch, and looked at Keisha. "Let us go," I said. "I have seen enough. The circus is over. Now it is time to shut down the tent." "Where are we going?" Keisha asked, scrambling to follow me. I pushed open the doors, the cool air of the lobby hitting my face. "We are going to the office," I said. "I need to print some eviction notices." And Keisha, "Yes, draft the divorce papers, cite adultery, and attach that photo as Exhibit A." We walked out of the ballroom, leaving Jason on stage, trapped in the embrace of a woman who was drowning, holding on to him like he was a life raft, neither of them realizing that I had already punctured the boat. As I walked through the lobby, I passed the poster of Jason again. Innovating the future. I stopped. I reached into my purse and pulled out a red lipstick I had brought but not worn. I uncapped it. With 2 swift strokes, I drew a large red X over his face. "Consider your future canceled, Jason," I whispered. I walked out into the night, leaving the beige ghost behind. The CEO of Athena Crisis Management was back in charge, and business was about to pick up. The ballroom was thick with the smell of anticipation and cheap cologne. On stage, Jason held a gold-plated pen hovering over the oversized ceremonial check that represented the transfer of funds. The crowd held its breath. This was it. The moment Jason Miller became a made man. The moment he secured the capital to launch his empire, unaware that he was signing his death warrant. Patricia stood next to him, swaying slightly, a glass of champagne tilting dangerously in her hand. She looked like a caricature of wealth, a fading starlet caught in the headlights of her own delusion. I stood at the back of the room, my hand resting on the heavy double doors of the main entrance. I was no longer the invisible wife in the beige dress. In the 30 minutes I had been gone, I had shed that skin. I was wearing a white Alexander McQueen power suit, tailored to within an inch of its life. My hair was loose, cascading over my shoulders in deliberate waves. My lips were painted a deep blood red. I looked like the CEO I was. I looked like the person who signed the paychecks, not the one who washed the dishes. I pushed the doors open. They swung wide with a heavy, authoritative boom that echoed through the silent room. Heads turned. At first there was confusion. They didn't recognize me. They saw a powerful woman striding down the center aisle, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers, and a woman in an emerald green jumpsuit who looked ready to prosecute God himself. Jason looked up from the check. He squinted against the stage lights. "Who is that?" he whispered into the microphone, his voice amplified across the room. I did not stop walking. My heels struck the marble floor with a rhythmic military cadence. Click, click, click. The sound was sharper than a guillotine blade. I walked past the table of engineers who had ignored me. I walked past the HR director who had pitied me. I walked past the VP of sales who had laughed at Jason's jokes about my cooking. As I approached the stage, the recognition finally hit Jason. His jaw dropped. The pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the podium. "Audrey," he stammered, "what are you doing? Why are you wearing that?" I didn't answer him. I walked up the stairs to the stage, my movements fluid and predatory. I stood between him and Patricia. The contrast was brutal. I was sharp lines and cold sobriety. They were messy, drunk, and chaotic. I reached out and took the microphone from Jason's hand. He didn't fight me. He was too paralyzed by shock. I turned to the audience. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "I am so sorry to interrupt this little production of Boy Toy Fly's Geriatric Jet," I said, my voice smooth and deadly calm. "But I'm afraid we have a bit of a legal situation that needs to be addressed before any checks are signed." The room erupted in murmurs. Jason grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, sweaty. "Audrey, are you crazy?" he hissed. "Get off the stage. You are embarrassing me. This is the biggest night of my life." I pulled my arm away as if his touch was infectious. "Oh, Jason, this night is big, all right, but not for the reasons you think." I nodded to Keisha, who was standing at the foot of the stairs with the officers. Keisha stepped up, holding a thick stack of legal documents. She didn't look at Jason. She looked straight at Patricia. "Mrs. Patricia Vance Keisha," said her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "I am Keisha Miller, an attorney representing your sons William and Edward Vance." Patricia blinked, trying to focus. "My sons," she slurred. "Billy and Eddie, are they here? Tell them to come have a drink." Keisha shook her head. "No, ma'am, they are not here. But they have been monitoring your activities, specifically your attempt to solicit funds from this man under false pretenses." Jason stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Hey, listen here. Patricia is a grown woman. She can invest her money however she wants. You cannot tell her what to do." Keisha ignored him. She held up the document. "Mrs. Vance, your sons appeared before a judge in Palm Beach 2 hours ago. Given your history of dementia and your susceptibility to financial predators, the court has granted an emergency conservatorship. Effective immediately, all your assets are frozen. You do not have the legal capacity to sign a contract, transfer funds, or enter into any business agreement." The room went deadly silent. Keisha turned to the police officers. "Gentlemen, please escort Mrs. Vance to the car. Her sons have arranged for a medical transport to take her home." One of the officers stepped forward gently. "Come with us, ma'am." Patricia looked around confused and suddenly very small. "But I wanted to give Jason the money," she whined like a child. "He is such a nice boy." He let me touch his muscles. The crowd gasped. The humiliation was absolute. Jason stood there watching as his angel investor, his ticket to the big time, was led away like a lost toddler. The ceremonial check on the podium was now just a worthless piece of cardboard. He turned to me. His face was a mask of pure terror. "Audrey," he screamed, his voice cracking. "What did you do? You called her sons. You ruined it. That was $2 million, Audrey. $2 million. You just destroyed our future. You jealous, petty, useless woman." He was shaking. He looked like he was going to hit me. I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. I let him scream. I let everyone see him for exactly what he was. A desperate man throwing a tantrum because his mommy took away his toy. "Our future," I repeated quietly into the microphone. "Jason, we do not have a future. We never did. Because you built this company on lies, and you tried to build your life on my back." I signaled to the technician in the back of the room. I had paid him $500 on my way in to switch the input on the projector. "Hit it," I said. The giant screen behind us, which had been displaying the Miller Tech logo, flickered. The image changed. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It was not a picture of Jason. It was a logo, a stylized golden shield with a spear. Underneath, in bold, elegant letters, it read, Athena Crisis Management. Jason turned around. He stared at the screen. "What is that?" he whispered. "That I said stepping closer to him is my company." His brow furrowed. "Your company. You do not have a company. You have a blog." I laughed. It was a dark, rich sound that chilled the air. "Jason, I am the founder and CEO of Athena Crisis Management. We specialize in reputation defense for ultra-high net worth individuals. My personal net worth is currently $40 million. I built it while you were busy playing startup CEO and racking up credit card debt that I quietly paid off." He shook his head, unable to process the information. "No, that is impossible. You cook dinner. You ask me for money for groceries. I did that to make you feel like a man, Jason, because I knew how fragile your ego was. But let us talk about the building we are standing in right now, or rather the office building where you work, the one you tried to get rent-free by sleeping with Patricia." I clicked the remote in my hand. The slide changed. It was a deed, a property deed for the building on Wilshire Boulevard. Jason squinted at the screen. "Do you see the owner's name, Jason?" I asked. He read it out loud, his voice trembling. "Wilshire Commercial Trust." I clicked the remote again. The next slide showed the beneficiary of the trust, Audrey Miller. Jason turned to me, his face draining of all color. You own the building." I stepped closer, invading his personal space. "I own the building, Jason. I bought it 6 months ago." Patricia Vance was just a name on the old lease paperwork from the previous management company. She hasn't been the landlord for half a year. "But you didn't check, did you? You were so busy trying to charm her, so busy trying to cheat on me to save a few dollars, that you didn't even do basic due diligence." I gestured to the screen. "You have been trying to sleep with a senile woman to get a rent reduction from your own wife." The audience erupted. It wasn't applause this time. It was shock. It was laughter. It was the sound of a reputation being shredded in real time. I turned to the crowd. "Employees of Miller Tech," I said, my voice commanding the room, "I have some bad news. The CEO you see before you is insolvent. The funding he promised you tonight does not exist. The payroll for next month is not in the bank." Murmurs of panic spread through the room. However, I continued raising a hand to silence them. "As the landlord of your office building and the holder of the collateral debt on this company, I am exercising my right to seize assets." I turned back to Jason. "Remember that paper you signed yesterday, Jason? The one you didn't read because you were in such a rush to mortgage our house." Jason's eyes went wide. He looked like he was going to vomit. "That paper," I said, smiling cruelly, "gave me 100% of your shares in Miller Tech if you engaged in any financial malfeasance or criminal activity. Bank fraud counts, Jason. And so does attempting to defraud a senior citizen." I leaned in close to the microphone so my whisper sounded like a thunderclap. "You are fired." Jason fell back a step, stumbling. "You cannot do this. I built this. This is mine." "It was never yours," I said. "You played house with my money, you played CEO with my building, and you played husband with my patience. You have nothing, Jason. The house is in foreclosure because I called the note. The car is being towed right now because I stopped the lease payments. And this company, it belongs to Athena now." I looked at the crowd again. "For those of you who actually do the work, the engineers, the designers, the support staff, if you want to keep your jobs, report to my office on the top floor on Monday morning. We are going to restructure, and the first change is that we are going to have competent leadership." I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening thud. I turned to walk away. Jason grabbed my arm again. This time he was crying. Tears were streaming down his face, ruining his fake tan. "Audrey, please," he begged. "We can fix this. I love you. Do not do this to me. I am your husband." I looked down at his hand on my white suit. I looked at him with the same expression one would look at a cockroach. I brushed his hand off. "My husband died the moment he put his arm around another woman at the mall," I said. "You are just a trespassing tenant, and your lease has expired." I turned and walked down the stairs. Keisha was waiting for me at the bottom, a look of pure awe on her face. That Keisha whispered was the most brutal thing I have ever seen. I adjusted my blazer. "We are not done yet," I said. "I still have to evict his mother." I walked out of the ballroom, the sound of Jason's sobbing fading behind me, drowned out by the rising murmur of employees realizing they had a new boss. A boss who didn't play games. A boss who played for keeps. The ballroom had emptied out, leaving only the cleaning crew sweeping up the confetti that was supposed to celebrate Jason's ascent, but now marked his burial. We had moved to the private executive suite attached to the venue, a room lined with mahogany and smelling of old money. It was the perfect setting for a massacre. Jason sat slumped in a leather chair, his tuxedo jacket discarded on the floor, his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for his punishment. I stood by the window looking out at the city lights of Los Angeles. I felt nothing for him. No pity, no anger, just the cold clinical satisfaction of a surgeon who has successfully excised a tumor. Keisha stood by the door, her arms crossed, holding a tablet that contained the final nails for Jason's coffin. Jason looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "Audrey," he rasped, "we can fix this. I know I messed up with Patricia. I know. But the house, we still have the house. We can refinance. We can pay off the bridge loan I took out. I just need time." I turned to face him. The white Alexander McQueen suit I wore felt like armor. "You do not have time, Jason, and you certainly do not have a house." Keisha stepped forward. She placed a document on the low table in front of him. It was a forensic handwriting analysis report. "Jason," Keisha said, her voice sharp and professional. "Did you really think we would not notice?" Notice what Jason stammered. "The signature on the wire transfer authorization," Keisha said. "You signed the mortgage papers with Audrey, yes. That was legal. But this morning when you went to the bank to wire that $500,000 to Patricia's account, the bank manager flagged it because of the hold Audrey had placed earlier. You couldn't get Audrey's signature to release the hold, so you forged it." Jason's face went gray. I just signed it for her. It is the same thing. We are married. Community property. It is not the same thing," Keisha corrected him. "It is wire fraud. It is identity theft. And it is a federal crime. I have already submitted this report to the bank's fraud department. The wire transfer has been reversed not because you canceled it, but because it was flagged as criminal activity. The money never reached Patricia. It is sitting in a frozen escrow account, pending a federal investigation." Jason let out a breath, looking almost relieved. "So, the money is safe. We can get it back. We can pay off the loan." I walked over to the table and picked up the second document, the one he had signed in my kitchen, the collateral agreement. "You seem to be forgetting something, Jason," I said softly. "The money is frozen, yes, but the debt you incurred to get that money is very real. You took out a high-interest bridge loan from a private lender, a predatory lender. Do you know who holds that note now?" He shook his head, confusion clouding his eyes. "I do," I said. "I bought the debt this afternoon, through a shell company, of course. You owe me $500,000, Jason, plus interest. And since you engaged in criminal activity by forging my signature, you have triggered the default clause in our collateral agreement." I opened the folder and pointed to paragraph 4. "In the event of any criminal investigation, financial malfeasance or conduct that damages the reputation of the collateral asset, the borrower agrees to an immediate forfeiture of all pledged assets." I looked him in the eye. The pledged asset was your equity in Miller Tech. Jason stood up, his legs shaking. "No. You cannot take my company. It is my name on the door. It is my vision. It was your vision," I said. "Now it is my property." And speaking of reputation, let us discuss what happened on that stage tonight. I pulled up the photo on my phone. The one of Patricia groping him. The one where he was laughing, condoning the sexual harassment of a senile woman for financial gain. "This," I said, showing him the screen. "This is a violation of the morality clause in your lease agreement for the office building. As the landlord of the Wilshire building, I have a zero-tolerance policy for tenants who engage in public acts of moral turpitude that reflect poorly on the property." I swiped to the next image. It was a termination of lease notice. You are evicted, Jason. Effective immediately. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects from the premises. Everything else, the servers, the furniture, the intellectual property now belongs to Athena Crisis Management as compensation for the breach of contract. Jason fell back into the chair. He was gasping for air. You took everything. The house, the company, the office. I didn't take it, I said. You gave it to me. You signed every piece of paper. You dug every inch of the hole. I just provided the shovel. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the hallway. The door to the suite burst open. It was Linda, my mother-in-law. She was wearing a gown that was too tight and too sparkly, her face a mask of panic. She had evidently arrived late to the party, missing the main event, but catching the aftershocks in the lobby. Jason, she screamed, rushing over to him. What is going on? Why is there police outside? Why is everyone leaving? I heard people saying the company is bankrupt. Tell me it is not true. She grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. Tell me, Jason. Tell me you secured the investment from Patricia. Jason looked up at his mother. He looked broken. There is no investment, Mom. Patricia is broke. She has dementia. Linda froze. Her eyes bulged. What? But you said she was a whale. You said she was going to save us. She is gone, Jason whispered. Her sons took her away. And Audrey took the rest. Linda spun around to face me. Her eyes narrowed into slits. What did you do? You sabotaged him, didn't you? You couldn't stand to see him succeed, so you ruined everything. You jealous, spiteful little... She raised her hand to slap me. I caught her wrist in midair. My grip was iron. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Linda, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. Unless you want to spend the night in a cell next to your son. I released her hand with a shove. She stumbled back, looking at me with shock. I had never touched her before. I had never raised my voice. You want to know what I did, Linda? I asked, stepping toward her. I stopped pretending. I stopped pretending that your son is a genius. I stopped pretending that you are a matriarch. And I stopped pretending that I am not the one paying for every single luxury you enjoy. Linda scoffed, adjusting her dress. You pay for nothing. Jason supports me. Jason pays for my condo. Jason pays for my Lexus. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time, fueled by the absurdity of her delusion. Jason has not had a positive bank balance in 3 years, I said. Who do you think sends those transfers, Linda? Look at the name on the account next time. It says AMC Holdings. Linda frowned. AMC, Audrey Miller Capital. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. I just sent an email to your condo association, Linda. I informed them that the guarantor for your unit has withdrawn support. You have 30 days to find a new sponsor or vacate the premises. Oh, and the lease on the Lexus. That is in my name, too. The repo man is scheduled to pick it up tomorrow morning at 8. I would suggest you take your personal items out of the glove box tonight. Linda's face went white. She looked at Jason. Jason, tell her she is lying. Tell her you pay for my things. Jason didn't look up. He just shook his head. I am sorry, Mom. I thought I could make it back before you found out. I used her money. I always used her money. Linda stared at me. The horror on her face was absolute. She wasn't just looking at a daughter-in-law she hated. She was looking at the god of her financial universe, and she realized she had just blasphemed. You cannot do this, she whispered. I am family. You are not family, I said coldly. Family protects each other. You told your son to cheat on me. You told him to abandon me. You called me useless. Well, Linda, you're about to find out how useful I was. Linda swayed. Her hand went to her chest. Her knees buckled. It wasn't a theatrical faint. It was the collapse of a woman whose entire reality had just been pulverized. She slid down the wall, sitting on the expensive carpet, gasping for air. Jason didn't move to help her. He was too deep in his own misery. I looked at the two of them, the mother who demanded prestige and the son who lied to give it to her. They were perfect for each other. Keisha stepped forward. The police are waiting in the lobby, Audrey. They want to talk to Jason about the wire fraud, and there are two gentlemen in the parking lot who say they are from the private lending firm. They look impatient. They want to discuss the collateral on the bridge loan. I nodded. Send the police up, but let the loan sharks wait. Jason will need someone to talk to after he posts bail. I walked over to the chair where Jason was sitting. I reached into his pocket. He didn't resist. I pulled out his wallet. I took out the black American Express card. "This is mine," I said, snapping it in half. Then I reached for his wrist. I unclasped the vintage Rolex Daytona, my father's watch. "And this," I said, rubbing the smudge of his fingerprint off the crystal. "This definitely does not belong to you." I put the watch in my pocket. I looked down at him one last time. "You wanted to be a big shot, Jason. You wanted the high-stakes life. Well, congratulations. You are now the defendant in a federal fraud case, the target of predatory lenders, and the ex-CEO of a company you no longer own. You finally made it to the front page news." I turned to Linda, who was still sobbing on the floor. "Goodbye, Linda. If you need a ride to the homeless shelter, I am sure the bus stop is a short walk from here. But do not expect me to pay the fare." I signaled to Keisha. "We are done here." We walked out of the suite, leaving the door open. As we walked down the hallway, I heard the heavy footsteps of the police officers approaching. I heard the sound of handcuffs clicking. I heard Jason reading his rights. The destruction was total. The legal framework had crushed his freedom. The financial clauses had stripped his assets. And the truth had shattered his family. I walked through the empty ballroom, my heels clicking on the marble. I felt lighter than I had in years. The air tasted cleaner. The ghost of the submissive wife had been exorcised, and in her place stood a woman who had just burned down the house to kill the rats. And as I pushed open the doors to the cool night air, I checked my phone, a notification from my bank. Rent payment received, Miller Tech. I smiled. My new company was already paying dividends. I looked at Keisha. "Tacos?" she asked. "Tacos," I agreed. "And champagne. We have a victory to celebrate." I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening in that suite. The collapse of an empire built on sand, and the rise of a woman built on steel. The biggest lesson I learned: silence is not submission. It is simply the sound of someone loading a weapon. Jason mistook my quiet support for weakness, forgetting that he who holds the purse strings holds the power. Ladies, never build your castle on a man's potential. Build it on your own assets. That way, if you ever have to walk away, you are not walking into the cold, you are walking into freedom. If you cheered when the beige ghost finally foreclosed on her cheating husband, hit like and share right now. Which moment was sweeter, the confrontation at the mall or the reveal in the boardroom? Let me know in the comments and subscribe so you never miss a story where the underdog bites back.